You were excited for Big 12 Media Days. I was excited for Big 12 Media Days. And trust me, they did not disappoint. Yesterday, we got an unbelievable amount of sound bites, information, and quotes that we are going to have to talk about. And we're going to start right here today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day, making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Boy, man, I'm just like giddy. I'm sorry. I'm totally losing my train of thought right now. You're going to have to give me a second. I'll come back to that. But today we're talking about really the Big 12 Media Days. Quotes that came out from all different, walks of life on different topics. We're talking about the kind of the Wild West that is college football. We're going to talk about Brett Yormark and his conversations, his quotes around the college football playoff, of course. And then I figured we'd kind of dive into Matt Campbell first today. There is an abundance of media that we need to talk about. But for now, let's just kind of go over the big ones and start there. Now, you probably notice I have a little bit of a different tone today because I think for the last 5 minutes, I have been just, every couple seconds chuckling, laughing to myself, just thinking about, football's back. And like, I just have this feeling of giddiness, it's like, gosh, it's, like they say seasonal depression, in like the winter and stuff because of the sun and whatever. My seasonal depression is like this, what would that be? June, July ish, because it comes to a point in the season, or I guess of the year, where I start to kind of almost forget that football exists. It's like it's just been too long. I'm not thinking about it as much as I am basically any other time of the year, relative, of course. That's how I work in relatives. But every once in a while, you'll get a football highlight that comes across your feed, or some sort of motivational Tom Brady quote with all of his just best throws over top, and it gets you jazzed, and you're like, man, I forgot about this. And then you're kind of back in the doom and gloom. It's just like a little fleeting chance of hope, if you will. This Big 12 Media Days, I mean, the end is near. I can feel football season coming, man. We're talking about the Cyhawk game yesterday, or it might have been 2 days ago. And we're I'm just like putting myself in the environment of the smell of the football atmosphere and the tailgates and the packed stadiums and the block punts and the Hail Marys and the everything. Man, I'm just so pumped up and giddy to get to talk about football. I love it. I love everything about it. I love that time of year. I love everything around the game of football. And Big 12 Media Days did an unbelievable job on Tuesday of kind of capturing a lot of, in my opinion, just truly just hope. Like, this is legit real football conversations now that we're having. And I apologize for kind of the extended intro here, but I could not mention, like, I just feel like I'm like floating, and I feel like a lot of you guys feel the same way when it comes to football, and just the magical atmosphere that it brings for everything. I know this Big 12 Media Days, there's so much content everywhere. And so I'm going to do my best over the next few days to consume as much of it as I possibly can and aggregate it into this program for you guys. So if you're looking to try to find everything that's going on with Big 12 Media Days, this is the place for it. Be sure to hit subscribe down below. It's completely free. Helps us prove that it is once and for all a Cyclone state. Let anybody else know that's trying to get informed on the Big 12. I'll be doing my best to aggregate all of that and relate it to the Cyclones here. But one thing that I, just in my last kind of point here, talking about the media side of it, there's so much, unbelievably so much media. And I saw Dominique Orange was on the BYU TV. I don't know if it was a set or whatever, but in a conversation with BYU TV, and asked about what it's like to play in Ames, and hearing him describe it, like, I put myself there and I was just like, I got to breathe. I need to remember that I am not currently at an Iowa State tailgate. Like that, I just am getting so amped up. I'm just like, this is the best time of year. Sorry, let's move on. As far as the no rules, the Wild West things goes, we do kind of have to evaluate this from the perspective of a lot of these quotes came out from the Big 12 head coaches kind of roundtable that they did. Thought that was a really cool deal. I'm going to have to give it another listen tomorrow. But what I'm really kind of talking about here is this article by Ross Dellinger saying, or the title of the article is, quote, "We don't know the rules. Big 12 coaches still wrestling with new world order after player payment changes." There are so many quotes in here and so many kind of peeks behind the curtains, or peek behind the curtains, or peeks behind the curtain, probably peeks anyways, of how this is actually going, and not just, in practice, how this should go. Basically, at the end of the day, what they're talking about is confusion in the rules. I believe it's Kenny Dillingham, or maybe Ross just deduces that Kenny was kind of saying this, that said, we don't really care what the rules are. We just we all want to have the same set of rules. We all want to know what the rules are. Right here, this quote from Kenny Dillingham saying, quote, "We don't know the rules. The settlement passed, but who knows what Deloitte is going to clear? Until there's clarity, you're living in limbo." Another thing he said was, you're seeing a lot of people lie and promise fake things. A big thing that was brought up was talking about the amount of money that schools are bringing in up front before the July 1 deadline. That was something that a lot of people talked about as far as confusion and what does that mean, down the road. There was also conversation here, in when you're talking about money, Texas Tech is obviously going to come up. I believe they front loaded 30 million plus the 20.5 in rev share. And there's conversation of not necessarily Texas Tech, but this was brought up in this article of if how do I want to go about this? Essentially, there is the things that are not supposed to be happening are allegedly happening, and no one was calling out any one specific school, but promises of rev share money for high school athletes to commit to said school, promises of collective or NIL deal money being a portion of their rev share money to come, through the transfer portal to a school or whatever the case is. Those kinds of conversations were being had. And so that's where I kind of circled this quote here from Joey McGuire, the Texas Tech head coach. He said, it says here, he describes his recruiting approach as the byproduct of high-level university support, careful planning, and an aggression that all schools should be taking to compete with the blue bloods of college football. Quote, "What we do as a conference is so important, but we also got to do it off the field. We've got to recruit at this level if we are going to continue to be in the same conversation as the SEC and Big Ten. We've got to understand as a conference that we've got to commit to that. We have committed to that at Texas Tech and eliminated any people saying, well, they can't do it there." Okay. There's a lot to unpack with this singular quote, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get to the rest of the article due to that. I don't necessarily know if I agree or disagree here. I think the biggest problem with this is, coming from Iowa State, and the culture that I think that Iowa State has built, and that's something we'll talk about, I'm sure, a ton over the next few weeks because it was brought up so many times during this media day. I don't think that, the my morals or my whatever, culture based perspective would agree with this, but I also don't necessarily disagree in the fact that the SEC, for the most part, was kind of the ones that were doing a lot underneath the table. Not to say that Big Ten wasn't, not to say there weren't schools in the Big 12, maybe in different sports, that weren't doing it. That's not necessarily true, but I do think that, like, I think we've all heard of like the Alabama or the LSU McDonald's bag full of cash. Like, there is an element of that, and there is an element too of the SEC and the Big Ten just having more money and it being easier for them to shell out the 20.5 million on top of everything that could, everything else that could be going on. And so for Texas Tech to essentially say that this is maybe the best way to go about it, I can see where they're coming from. You've got to compete with the big dogs, or else you're run out of the race. But I just, it does feel like maybe we're stretching the rules a little bit. Of like, that's the kind of the point. You don't want to cannibal. I get what he's saying, because he's trying to basically justify what they're doing. But you don't want to cannibalize your own conference, for one, and two, this is like against the spirit of what essentially the settlement was. The settlement was designed to put everyone on the exact same playing field. And if this feels like, to me, it's like we're stretching the rules and we're coming up with this reason why. It's like, well, why don't we just all follow the rules? And then it would, I mean, that's just the way my brain works, nonetheless. If you agree or disagree, you got to let me know in the comments down below, or on Twitter at Nick_Marv. I'm checking that stuff constantly for you guys. We'll come back with some more conversations around kind of this maybe, but we're definitely going to be moving into Brett Yormark's comments on the college football playoff, which certainly has question marks around it. We're coming back with that right here after this. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the no rules kind of sentiment, we will revisit this down the line. I just wanted to touch on this really quickly before we pivot towards Brett Yormark's comments that he made, because we will definitely be revisiting the no rules roundtable essentially conversation that happened. I think that there is an element of, as long as we are all abiding by the exact same set of rules, which Scott Frost, kind of alluded to when he talked about the NFL, like everyone knows what the rules are and you can't break the rules. And like, there is this very clear cut number in the sand that you have to follow, or else like you're fired or whatever it would be. Like, there is no exceptions. This is, everyone understands this. I think that's what they're looking for at the college level, of like, look, this is exactly how this is going to go. No questions. And even if you ask questions, we're not going to even answer them, because they aren't going to be considered, because this is how it's exactly going to go. And then everyone abides by those rules and we don't have a problem. But it seems like there is kind of like this, like, well, this is kind of an idea of what we should be doing. Here's this super long, lengthy thing, a court case, whatever. And here's a set of rules, but like, follow them if you want. Like, that's not really how this works. Or at least that's not what the Big 12 coaches are asking for. And I think I can agree with that. I think it's only fair that everyone abides by the same set of rules, but maybe that's the NFL fan in me. I'm not entirely sure. Nonetheless, like I said, we will revisit that. Don't you worry. There is an abundance of content to cover from these Big 12 media days here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be sure to hit subscribe down below. It's completely free, helps us prove it's a Cyclone state, and you get to stay up to date with all of the latest going on in this Big 12 media. If you've got anything in particular you want me to comment on, let me know in the comments down below, because now we're pivoting towards Brett Yormark, talking about the 5+11 model being the absolute best option for this playoff model going forward. The college football playoff, probably expansion, probably what we're going to be looking at. Is it 14 or 16 teams? We'll see. But nonetheless, there will probably be an expansion, and there will probably be an adjustment of how the entire playoff is run. If you haven't been paying attention, honestly, I think you probably have to be going full Patrick Star mode to not know exactly what's going on with this college football playoff conversation. But there is essentially two camps. I'm going to quickly recap this. There is kind of the Big Ten, the SEC, or at least the Big Ten, and then half SEC, Big 12, two models of the college football playoff that we could be staring down. Essentially, the 4-4-2-2-1 plus 1 or whatever it is model, and the 5+11 model. Now, both of these are kind of under the 16 team model basis. We're not entirely sure what's going to happen as far as even if it's a jump to 16, although it does feel like that's a given. But if it goes to 16, is it based on what kind of committee decisions are being made? Does the SEC go to 9 conference games? They won't probably go to 9 conference games under the 5+11 model, but they probably would under the 4-4-2-2-1 model. Essentially, the 4-4-2-2-1 model is the SEC and the Big Ten both getting 4 automatic qualifiers. The Big 12 and the ACC getting 2 each, and then a non-Power 4 conference getting an automatic bid as well. And then if Notre Dame was in the top 16, they would get one. Wild situation there. The 5+11 is just the top 4, Power 4 conferences all get an auto bid, and then the non-Power 4 conferences, best team gets an auto bid, and then there is 11 at-large bids. We've had conversations of why the 5+11 is great. To put it all in a bow, basically, it kind of embodies the spirit of the game. It's you got your automatic qualifiers, but for the most part, it's the best teams that are put in. We've also talked about why this might not be the best idea. Essentially, that based on the committee, they could easily lean heavily into the SEC and the Big Ten and leave the Big 12 out entirely, essentially gambling and losing consistently year after year after year on this 5+11 model, which in theory does work. But if the committee is going to lean heavily into 2 conferences and away from the ACC and the Big 12, that just doesn't work. It's not how the system is meant to be run, and it gets away from the true spirit of the game. Now that you're kind of up to speed, Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark says he expects multiple teams from his league, aka the Big 12, to make the 12-team playoff this year and, quote, show once again we can compete with anyone. I think this year is probably your most, I would feel very strongly about this year in comparison to maybe past years. But that's just because I feel very, very good about Iowa State. And I think the quarterback play in the Big 12 right now is arguably maybe the best it's ever been across the board. Is that fair to say? Or am I being a little bit too short-sighted, a little too recency biased? The Big 12 is very, very good right now. And if they can, I think they can easily get 1, probably 2, maybe 3 would be really stretching it in a 5+11 model. In a 12-team playoff, I think you could probably get at least 2. And then I think that at least one of those teams wins a game. So I agree with him just because the quarterback play is so good. But that's a very much a gambling on yourself play from Brett Yormark here. And he says, we continue to believe the 5+11 model is the right playoff format. We want to earn it on the field. We do not need a professional model. We are not the NFL. We are college football, and we must act like it. Well, to be fair, and honestly play a little bit of devil's advocate here, what even is college football anymore? Do we even have an idea of what we're looking at? Because I think a lot of people are confused, namely every single one of your coaches in your league. Not your fault necessarily, but certainly very, very odd time in college football. He did double down on his support for the 5+11 format in a clear opposition to the Big Ten's multi-AQ model per Ross Dellinger. I don't know if that means twice in the same day or if that means just the comments that he made today in conjunction with the comments he made earlier this offseason. And finally, from Ross Dellinger here, this is a very interesting quote, or at least tweet, I thought. Brett Yormark in a small group of reporters after his address re-emphasizes, I'm going to pause and slow this down a little bit, that the memorandum of understanding signed by the CFP leaders last year does not necessarily grant sole and exclusive power to the Big Ten and SEC over future format. Interesting. Welcome to Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sorry to leave you on a cliffhanger there. I understand that was a wild play, but I just had to. I apologize. To revisit Brett Yormark's comment there, That is not what we've heard, or at least what I've heard, or what I've seen, or what I've read. So I would love to know more about that. I think maybe what he's kind of doing is bending his words a little bit and talking about how there is, the Big Ten and the SEC are supposed to kind of act in good faith in in conversations that they're going to have with the Big 12 and the ACC, yada yada yada. I just thought that was a very interesting quote that Ross Dellinger put out, essentially from Brett Yormark. There are no quotations in this tweet, just saying what he said. Very interesting time from Brett Yormark here talking about this college football. I personally think that the best play is to go. I mean, knowing what the committee's history is makes me want to go multi AQ, but my belief in the Big 12 makes me want to go 5+11. I've said I think the best option is to go threes across the board or twos across the board with more at-large bids, but we're not going to find that middle ground. It's either going to be a ridiculous amount of automatic qualifiers for the Big Ten and the SEC, or it's going to be none, really, just one across every conference. So let me know what you think is probably the right play down below. Now, however, it is time to talk about some Matt Campbell. So Matt big bad Matt Campbell. Some quotes. Let's talk about it. I've got a few really major talking points here. We're going to fire through them. What they're going to boil down to is the linebacker room, the defensive line, kind of the secondary, sort of the wide receivers, and then injuries is really what it kind of boils down to, or at least what I have here. This came from an interview with Cyclone Fanatic that they did with Matt Campbell, or at least that's what it was on their page. I believe that they had multiple reporters there, but I'm not sure if they all worked for Fanatic or not. Nonetheless, this is what we're looking at here. Matt Campbell with the linebacker room is very excited about the possibility of that room. And when he said that, I was super stoked. First off, because I feel the same way. I think that group could be unbelievably good for Iowa State. But in multiple facets, and this is an interesting point here. Not only the depth, but also the communication from that locker room, or from that linebacker room, excuse me. The linebacker is kind of the field general of the defense. They're kind of the guys out there making the communications to the defensive line. The safeties are running all over the place. They're not really in that role so much. It is mostly the linebackers. And with having so many new guys out on the field last season, it was difficult for Iowa State to really have that stability right behind those big boys up front. And so that's going to add a level of challenge to a defense. It's almost unnecessary, right? It's not literally just a physical downside or I don't know how the best way to say this is, like, mountain they have to overcome, level of adversity, but also a mental side of, like, getting everyone lined up correctly, calling everything out to the boys up front, calling everything out to the things that they're seeing when guys are running all around, making adjustments to each other. Those kinds of things are significantly harder to do when you're just worried about getting yourself ready, let alone the rest of the defense. And I think that Matt Campbell is exactly right. This season, we're going to see an unreal level up in that department for sure, but also the depth, like we've been talking about. The guys that were out there prior, in this prior season, they have gotten so many reps, and more reps really than they even should have at this point in their career, quote unquote, their time with Iowa State. But also the guys that are coming back, some of the greatest in the game, definitely for Iowa State. And so that's a point I haven't brought up much about the linebackers, is their level of communication. It's a great point from Matt Campbell. I mean, obviously there's a reason he's the head coach. Just so excited about that linebacker room. Like, I genuinely think that this defense and this team is going to be so unbelievably good because of the guys that are returning from injury. And everyone's going to say, what the team was last year. They were good, but they couldn't quite get it done. They're losing all these guys to the NFL. We're getting so many guys back from injury. Like, I genuinely, really, really think this team is going to be so good. And when Matt Campbell was asked about guys that no one was talking about, there was really two names and a third that he kind of threw in there at the end that he was talking about. One was River Peppers, a guy that I have consistently brought up. I thought it was important when he mentioned his name in the spring. And he said again, I had a dynamic spring for us. And then he also mentioned Marcus Neal, especially in the second half of that Miami game, a guy that could be absolutely electric on the defensive side of the ball. He also mentioned the safety room just as a whole has a chance to show how deep that room could be. And then Drew Surges, a name that he kind of popped in at the end there, saying we didn't have him last year, but he showed up big time this spring. So a couple guys, a little bit of a surprise. I know this wasn't in the preview of the entire segment, but a couple guys to keep an eye on. I think that's the thing with this team is that there are so many guys returning from injury or redshirt or whatever that are going to shock this season. You're going to see your big name guys, but there are going to be a ton of dudes based on what I'm hearing. They're just going to come out of nowhere, come out of the woodwork, and they're going to be household names by week 3 because Iowa State will be 3-0. And they are going to make huge plays in those games that are going to set Iowa State apart. And now, before I get too far off, I'm going to keep this quick here to get back to Matt Campbell's quotes, but it came up consistently talking about Iowa State, starting the season with Kansas State and then having, Iowa in week 3. Rocco said that this is maybe the hardest first 4 games of any Iowa State year ever. I think that's a pretty bold claim. I'll say that. I don't know if I necessarily agree or disagree. I'd have to go probably back and look through in pretty good depth. But I don't think he's that far off necessarily just because you're playing Kansas State week 1, kind of an odd scenario there, an in-conference opponent. Anyways, I just wanted to touch on that really quickly because I think that is worth mentioning. Then let's kind of pivot because I've got a few minutes here. There are a couple other things that Campbell threw out. Caleb Bacon and Zach Lovett being at full strength again is going to be huge for the program. I agree. I think Caleb Bacon for sure, but Zach Lovett, another one of those guys that is going to make a huge difference. In the secondary, as I mentioned, something that he wanted to talk about. And I know I've still got the defensive line and the corners, and this was going to be a long conversation. We're probably going to talk way more about this the rest of the week, so stick around. But as far as the secondary goes, Campbell always surprises me when talking about the secondary. Every time I am shocked that he is so excited and hyped up for the secondary because, in my opinion, it's where I have the biggest question mark, and I will stand by it. And I know it's what I've said. And I know that whenever I say this, it makes me seem like a fool because I am essentially disagreeing with Campbell. I'm not trying to do that. I just don't ever completely understand where he's coming from here. Is it a coaching angle? Is it something that he truly is seeing? It sounds like he's got a lot to be excited about. Like, genuinely, the way he's laying it out with James Patton, Kaishan Cummings-Coleman, or I think it was Kaishan was how he said it. Benny Ngoye, Quentin Taylor, the Trey Bell, like these guys that he's just throwing these names around are he speaks very highly of them in multiple different facets, showing up and putting in the effort or their length, their speed, their whatever. The way he speaks on this secondary, he's beyond thrilled. And so when you hear me talk about the secondary, keep in mind that Matt Campbell is more than excited about this group, which to me means that Iowa State's going to go undefeated because between Matt Campbell and myself, I don't see a bad position group out there. I see only strong suits for Iowa State, which is exciting. But that's just me. Let me know what you guys think. Are you consuming as much Big 12 media as I am? This is one of the best times other than true football of the year because it's like that reinvigorance of hope. Do you feel the same level of jazzed up as I do? Because, boy, I mean, I am just so thrilled for football to be back. I'm also thrilled because I just heard the click. You hit that subscribe button down below. Shout out to you, especially shout out to you for making it to this point in the episode. Until next time, Cyclone fans. Sayonara.